On May 28, 1940, inside the Reich Air Ministry in Berlin, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring dismissed the intelligence briefing with clear disdain. The report outlined President Roosevelt's appeal to Congress for a massive boost in U.S. aircraft manufacturing, aiming for an output of 50,000 planes each year. "The Americans must be frantic if they think this kind of hype will intimidate us," Göring remarked to his team. "They have no clue about wartime manufacturing. Let them attempt to repurpose their car plants. They'll discover that crafting fighter planes demands far beyond just conveyor belts." What escaped Göring's understanding was that in Detroit, a Danish-born newcomer named William Knudsen was already disproving his assumptions. The ex-president of General Motors, now serving as Roosevelt's production head for a symbolic $1 annually, was directing the grandest industrial overhaul ever seen. Over the next 4 years, U.S. facilities wouldn't merely hit the scorned target of 50,000 planes, but would churn out almost 100,000 yearly, all while equipping forces in 2 distant war zones separated by vast seas. The statement that sparked such German scorn was issued on May 16, 1940, as German panzers surged across France. Addressing Congress, Franklin Roosevelt stated, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." Even supporters reacted with doubt. In 1939, the U.S. had built only 3,011 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps held 700 combat aircraft, many outdated. Still, Roosevelt called for a 14-fold surge in output. William Knudsen emerged as the mastermind behind this feat. When queried on who might pull off such a daunting task, presidential advisor Bernard Baru replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had forsaken his $300,000 income to aid his adopted country, applying auto industry's mass production techniques to plane construction. The shift kicked off right away. Come December 1941, U.S. plants were generating 2,000 military aircraft per month, a 20-fold jump from 2 years prior. The Ford Motor Company revealed intentions for a huge bomber facility at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing grew its Seattle operations. Douglas Aircraft onboarded thousands of employees. The arsenal of democracy stirred to life. The Nazi elite's rejection of U.S. prowess arose from racial bias and deliberate ignorance. General Friedrich von Berthica, the Wehrmacht military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, forwarded precise dispatches on American industrial buildup. His December 1940 message cautioned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin brushed off these alerts as pessimistic overstatements. During his February 1939 encounter with Hitler to cover U.S. strengths, the Führer instead railed against American racial inferiority, ignoring the intel briefs. Hitler declared Americans as half-Judaized, half-negrified, and unfit for prolonged conflict. Such doctrinal short-sightedness would ultimately doom them. The bias infected every rank. Luftwaffe intel rejected accounts of women joining plane factories as evidence of U.S. panic. They failed to imagine that free society efforts could outstrip dictatorial directives. Upon hearing of plants operating round the clock in 3 shifts, German evaluators chalked it up to hype. The Nazi mindset simply rejected the truth of American ingenuity. Ford's Willow Run site captured the essence of U.S. drive. Begun on farmland starting April 18, 1941, it evolved into the planet's biggest single-roof factory at 3.5 million square feet, featuring a mile-long assembly line. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production leader, vowed to assemble 1 B-24 Liberator bomber hourly, while rivals managed just 1 daily. Early efforts proved disastrous. The initial bomber, finished in September 1942, needed total reconstruction. Defect rates hit 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run yielded only 56 bombers a month, far short of the pledged hundreds. Detractors nicknamed it Will It Run. Yet Ford's technicians pressed on, dividing the B-24's 488-193 components into simpler subunits. They innovated hydraulic riveters, ready-made wiring bundles, and flowing production lines. They handled 578 design tweaks in 1943 while keeping output steady. By September 1943, monthly yields climbed to 148 bombers. By December, 365. The turning point arrived in April 1944, with Willow Run delivering 428 B-24s, one every 63 minutes around the clock. This one site alone surpassed the whole German aircraft sector. German aviators began acknowledging U.S. manufacturing dominance amid the Tunisia operations. Major Johannes Steinhoff, leader of JG-77, observed in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The awareness built rapidly into 1943. On January 27th, the initial U.S. bombing run struck Germany proper, 64 bombers at pursuing objectives at Wilhelmshaven. Come October, amid the turmoil of Black Thursday over Schweinfurt, U.S. forces sacrificed 60 B-17s yet managed to replenish them in just 2 weeks. The numbers painted an unavoidable picture. From February 20 to 25, 1944, during Big Week, the 8th and 15th Air Forces unleashed 3,500 bomber missions targeting German plane manufacturing. The Luftwaffe suffered losses of 262 to 355 fighters, but the true blow landed with around 100 seasoned pilots who couldn't be replaced. General Adolf Galland informed Göring that Germany was shedding 200 fighters each month against a production rate of only 1,000. In contrast, the United States churned out 2,500 fighters monthly while forfeiting just 400. Major Heinz Baer, among Germany's elite aces boasting 220 kills, recounted a January 1944 sortie above Brunswick. The formation of bombers extended endlessly across the sky, at minimum 700 flying fortresses and liberators. Our 8 fighters faced off against hundreds. It felt utterly futile. By 1944, U.S. aircraft manufacturing had ballooned to astonishing levels. That single year saw factories assemble 96,270 planes, including 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,143 fighters, and 20,000 multi-engine types. This output alone surpassed Germany's total wartime tally of roughly 94,000 aircraft. The gap extended far past mere quantities. Every U.S. bomber bristled with 50-caliber machine guns stocked with thousands of rounds. German interceptors, meanwhile, took to the air with incomplete ammo supplies more and more. American heavies boasted powered turrets, cutting-edge bomb sights, and refined navigation gear. German pursuits frequently flew without reliable radios. At Boeing's Seattle Plant 2, output hit 16 B-17s per day by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, starting with a mere 68 employees in 1936, expanded to 167,000 staff across 9 sites. North American Aviation pumped out 500 P-51 Mustangs every month. Lockheed hit a rhythm of 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, all while folding in 2,127 upgrades born from battlefield lessons. Ancillary sectors kept stride with this frenzy. General Motors manufactured 57,958 engines for planes under license. Packard assembled 55,593 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa's aluminum yields surged by 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium output leaped from 6 million pounds yearly to 333 million. America's labor shift upended Nazi assumptions. Women, who made up under 1% of aircraft laborers in 1941, swelled to 65% by 1943, totaling 310,000 in the field. At Douglas's Long Beach operation, 22,380 of 41,120 workers were female. Roseville Monroe, the iconic Rosie the Riveter, hammered in 3 rivets per shift at Willow Run, hitting 99.5% precision. Female quality checkers at Douglas slashed flaw rates from 3.2% to 0.3%. Ford adapted tools for smaller grips, which unexpectedly boosted productivity. Slimmer pneumatic devices cut down on exhaustion, and smarter workstation layouts trimmed injuries. German spies dismissed the influx of women as a sign of crisis. A seized Luftwaffe document belittled them as short-term hires, foreseeing a drop in standards. Yet, craftsmanship sharpened. Women thrived in intricate tasks like wiring, instrumentation, and scrutiny. Their role symbolized America's democratic resilience, not frailty. As U.S. output skyrocketed, Germany slipped into illusion. Göring greenlit the Jaeger Initiative in February 1944, scattering production to 729 subterranean sites reliant on forced labor. The Mittelwerk complex exploited 60,000 inmates in brutal settings, claiming 20,000 lives. Those hidden plants generated more flaws than functional aircraft. Captive workers tampered with parts deliberately, hauling materials across fragmented locations, bred holdups. Oversight of quality crumbled. The whole Mittelwerk network yielded fewer engines per month than Ford's lone Chicago facility. At the same time, U.S. ingenuity pressed forward. Boeing pioneered sectional B-29 assembly over 4 plants, ensuring fully swappable components. The sealed B-29, priced at $65,000 apiece, packed tech that Germany could only dream of in test models. By early 1945, the nation was rolling out 100 B-29s monthly. The D-Day assault on June 6, 1944, showcased the peak of American manufacturing might. It deployed 11,590 Allied planes to counter just 319 German flights, a 36-to-1 edge. This marked not mere strategic edge, but outright industrial dominance. From January through May 1944, pre-invasion strikes unleashed 145,000 tons of ordnance on German sites, outpacing all of Germany's raids on Britain for the entire conflict. Cargo planes ferried 3 paratroop divisions in a single day, using more aircraft than the entire German transport armada ever mustered. By December 1944, individual missions marshaled 200 bombers shielded by 900 escorts. P-51 Mustangs ranged as far as Poland, outflew any rival, and came in numbers that rendered casualties negligible. German aviators dubbed them Indians, appearing in swarms from all directions at once. As loss loomed, even top Nazi figures confronted the manufacturing disaster. In December 1944, Goebbels noted in his journal, "Göring's vows of Luftwaffe dominance ring like criminal fantasies now. We battle the planet's supreme industrial force," with Rommel warned his officers prior to the Normandy invasion, stating, "The Americans could afford to lose 10 tanks for each one we take out and still overpower us. Upon their arrival, they'll bring such overwhelming resources that no defensive line will stand." Even Hitler conceded to Speer in January 1945, saying we ought to have heeded Bletchley's intelligence dispatches. Their manufacturing capacity proved pivotal. Where we assembled hundreds, they churned out tens of thousands. Albert Speer later declared under oath that U.S. aerial campaigns cut German output by 35% for tanks, 31% for planes, and 42% for trucks. He asserted without reservation that the methodical U.S. strikes against factories led to the collapse of Germany's weapons industry. The Messerschmitt Me 262 jet, deployed in mid-1944, showcased true ingenuity, outpacing any Allied fighter by 100 mp. Hitler and Göring pinned their hopes on this marvel to regain control of the skies, despite being outnumbered. Yet Germany managed only 30 Mi-26Y2s in total, with no more than 200 ever airworthy at once. Their engines needed servicing after just 10 hours. Scarce resources compelled the use of subpar alternatives. In contrast, the U.S. initiated jet research back in 1942. Though the Bell P-59 fell short of German designs, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, which surpassed all German jets, rolled into service before the conflict concluded. The depth of American industry enabled parallel advances in various fields, a capability Germany lacked. This disparity defined the war's industrial result. Germany's edge in jet technology amounted to little when set against America's capacity to mass-produce thousands of traditional fighters alongside pioneering future designs. Excellence absent mass production held no value in all-out conflict. Hermann Göring's capture on May 8, 1945, by troops from the U.S. 36th Infantry Division signaled the start of his reckoning with the truth. At first, he resisted during questioning at the Augsburg Center, insisting that German ingenuity had been unmatched, subdued solely by sheer volume. His move to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the special site for top Nazi detainees, ushered in rigorous examinations. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler led thorough sessions, recording Göring's gradual acceptance of U.S. manufacturing dominance. I recognized the U.S. had vast industrial strength, Göring confessed to Heckler, but the reality surpassed my darkest expectations. That one plant at Willow Run outproduced our whole bomber fleet at its height. It defied understanding. He voiced special amazement at U.S. supply chains. Your skill in provisioning troops across 2 oceans without halting homefront output, this eluded our imagination. We struggled to sustain units just 500 miles from home. You equipped armies 5,000 miles away. At the Nuremberg proceedings, accusers confronted Göring with irrefutable proof of American output supremacy. Graphs illustrated the U.S. fabricating more planes each month in 1944 than Germany achieved yearly. Footage of Willow Run's production lines ran as lawyers enumerated German urban areas razed by bombers originating from that very site. In his March 14, 1946, statement, Göring grappled openly with the magnitude. I viewed America's economic and engineering prowess as exceptionally strong, especially in aviation. Yet I couldn't fathom them multiplying plane output 100 times over 4 years. That kind of expansion appeared mechanically unfeasible. Prison psychiatrist G.M. Gilbert noted Göring's fixation on output data. He obsessively computed comparisons, pitting individual U.S. facilities against Germany's full-scale efforts. Willow Run especially haunted him. He dubbed it, "that cursed plant that crushed us." Faced with evidence that America had manufactured 812,115 aircraft engines compared to Germany's 241,975, Göring just gazed mutely at the numbers. The numerical truth of their loss stood unassailable. The extent of this shift still astounds in the present day. Starting from 3D-11 combat planes in 1940, the U.S. reached 295,959 by 1945's close, 90,810 bombers, 90,945 fighters, and 98,084 in other categories. This wasn't mere volume. It reflected all-encompassing excellence across production phases. At its zenith, 2 million Americans toiled in aviation, embracing remarkable inclusivity. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, those with disabilities, youths, and seniors all contributed. Such inclusive effort accomplished what authoritarian directives failed to match, surpassing coerced work in every measure. Workers who stepped into plants in 1941 with zero aviation knowledge became, by 1945, the globe's premier aircraft specialists. Beyond assembling aircraft, they transformed production methods. Techniques like statistical process control, honed for bombers, evolved into universal industry standards. Automation concepts debuted at Willow Run reshaped manufacturing everywhere. The designers of bomber assembly lines went on to craft the Saturn V rocket. The women who fastened rivets on B-24s raised offspring who eventually set foot on the lunar surface. The extraordinary feats of manufacturing extended far beyond the triumph of war. They propelled the United States into a new era of global leadership. The economic scale challenged conventional theories. Building aircraft required $45 billion in 1940s currency, which equates to $800 billion in modern terms. The B-29 initiative outspent even the Manhattan Project. Instead of draining the nation's resources, these wartime efforts sparked an era of unmatched affluence. The joblessness that had tormented the 1930s disappeared entirely. Individual earnings surged twofold from 1940 to 1945. Employees funded a large portion of the growth through their own war bond purchases. At Willow Run, staff bought $45 million worth of bonds to support their facilities' activities. In contrast, Germany devoted 40% of its total industrial output to aircraft by 1944, yet managed only about half of what the U.S. achieved. Dependence on forced labor, which grew steadily, backfired disastrously. Acts of sabotage spread widely, standards plummeted. Output per worker in Germany actually dropped after 1943, even as American efficiency soared by 300%. The wartime industrial framework laid the groundwork for the economic boom that followed. Facilities smelting aluminum for bombers shifted to supplying materials for suburban homes. Plants producing fuel for planes turned to manufacturing plastics for everyday products. Shops making tools for aircraft factories re-equipped U.S. manufacturing for worldwide supremacy. More than mere output, the era showcased masterful organization. The War Production Board synchronized efforts across 184,000 firms without a hitch. IBM's card systems monitored countless parts from myriad vendors. At MIT's Radiation Lab, with 4,000 researchers, innovations in navigation granted U.S. bombers the ability to operate in any weather. Upon discovering the B-17's weakness to head-on assaults in battle, Boeing installed chin turrets in just 60 days. For Pacific missions needing greater reach, Consolidated adapted B-24s while keeping lines running uninterrupted. German alterations, however, dragged on for months or even years. U.S. enhancements wrapped up in weeks. Such flexibility mattered as much as sheer numbers. American planes advanced steadily, drawing from worldwide fighting insights. Data from Pacific engagements reached Atlantic factories in mere days. Meanwhile, German planes, assembled in hidden bunkers by coerced workers, stayed unchanged, as U.S. models refined themselves every week. The rapid cycle-linking battlefield feedback to manufacturing yielded remarkable results. Airman's reports hit engineers' desks right away. Fixes from engineers hit production floors shortly after. Ideas from factory hands flowed straight to the design team. This open exchange outshone Germany's rigid top-down structure. On October 15, 1946, mere hours from his planned execution, Hermann Göring penned his parting note. There, he offered his fullest recognition of the industrial conflict's importance. Victory came to the Americans via manufacturing might, not superior tactics in the field. We fell not to finer troops, but to superior workshops. The country we scorned as mere makers of luxuries overwhelmed the Wehrmacht with torrents of metal and alloy. His closing remark to Gilbert carried similar weight. We struck at a sleeping manufacturing colossus. Once roused, our fate was sealed. They surpassed us in volume alone. They transformed the very process of making. Every part of their approach outmatched ours. Göring took his life that evening, yet his parting words endure as history's judgment on the manufacturing struggle. The Reich's field marshal, once skeptical of U.S. strengths, perished aware that one American plant outdid his whole air command's total yield over its existence. Experts in military history view the U.S. manufacturing triumph as the key to Allied success. Absent the vast edge in resources it delivered, the D-Day invasion could not have succeeded, the aerial assaults would have faltered, and the fight in the Pacific remained unwinnable. Richard Overy, foremost authority on the aerial campaign, observed that the result hinged not on courage in battle or clever maneuvers, but on the sheer mass of resources. The Allies prevailed by smothering foes beneath mountains of output. The figures confirm this view without question. In 1944, the U.S. by itself outbuilt the entire planet's military planes, Allies and Axis alike. This went beyond modest leads. It represented total mastery. Germany confronted not mere loss, but utter destruction. Still, the wonder of this manufacturing surge reached further than armed conquest. It demonstrated democracy's edge over autocracy, liberty's power against oppression, and willing teamwork's force versus compelled submission. Those who drove this shift were not bound laborers or draftees, but citizens freely joined in shared resolve. Hermann Göring's early scorn for American manufacturing prowess endures as Hermann Göring's disdain for the industrial might of democracies stands as one of history's gravest errors. By underestimating the productive power of free societies, he doomed Germany to defeat and sacrificed countless lives. Ignoring the vast potential of the United States ensured the collapse of the Third Reich long before Allied bombs darkened German airspace. The leap from a mere 3,000 to 100,000 planes per year illustrated how nations under dire peril can accomplish the extraordinary through open collaboration. U.S. laborers not only fulfilled President Roosevelt's daunting target, but surpassed it by double. They outpaced German output by a factor of 5, all while battling forces across the Pacific theater. Modern policymakers should heed Göring's fatal oversight. Writing off democratic countries as feeble due to their pursuit of peace or belittling the ingenuity of liberated citizens who value growth over domination courts disaster on an epic scale. In 1940, America seemed woefully unready for conflict. Yet by 1944, it emerged as an invincible manufacturing powerhouse. The arsenal of democracy, revealed that factory output could rival battlefield triumphs, that laborers on production floors were vital as frontline troops, and that economic gearing up could dictate outcomes every bit as much as tactical plans. Göring grasped this truth far too belatedly, paying with the utter ruin of his homeland. Spanning from his scornful response to Roosevelt's declaration in May 1940 to his hanging at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's path mirrored the downfall of Nazi Germany. His scorn toward U.S. manufacturing served as the Third Reich's ultimate obituary, a dictatorship that equated dogma with competence, oppression with power, and pseudo-scientific fantasies with raw engineering prowess. The Reichsmarshal, who scoffed at American aviation output, met his end aware that U.S. plants churned out more fighters in 1944 than Germany achieved across the full conflict. What began as his ridicule of open market efficiency evolved into the priciest blunder in history, settled in the grim coin of absolute surrender. The United States built 295 959 warplanes in total. Germany managed 94,977. True triumph, however, resided in the approach, not mere tallies. It showed how voluntary labor could outperform coerced drudgery, how collective effort and freedom could surpass dictatorial edicts, and how a melting pot of newcomers in varied backgrounds could rally to perform feats once deemed unattainable. The B-24 Liberators, emerging from Willow Run's lines at a rate of 1 every 63 minutes, were more than machines. They embodied liberty's retort to despotism. Every fastener hammered by a former homemaker now in overalls, every motor crafted by a young dropout enlisting for duty, every fuselage pieced together by those escaping hardship and bias. Together, they affirmed that united in a just struggle, democratic populations can overwhelm authoritarianism with a torrent of output. Hermann Göring derided the notion of America hitting 50,000 aircraft yearly. The nation replied by delivering over 100,000, reshaping the world's course forever. His derision reverberates as the echo of a ruinous blunder, the reckless rejection of democracy's firepower by someone blind to both its principles and its machinery. Ultimately, it entombed him and his entire ideology beneath a sky darkened by nearly 300,000 planes, converting his arrogance into the most thorough vanquishment ever recorded.